September 1944, Eastern France. Dawn doesn't arrive with sunlight. It arrives with fog, thick, wet fog that clings to the ground and erases distance, sound, and certainty. From above, the fields look quiet. From below, they are killing grounds. Somewhere ahead, German armor is moving. Panthers, tigers, steel shapes you don't hear until they're already too close. Their engines are low, controlled, patient. They don't rush. They don't need to. Time is on their side. American positions are scattered across open farmland. Sherman tanks sit hull down where they can thin armor pressed against thicker guns. On paper, they are tanks. In reality, they are targets waiting for the wrong angle. German Panthers can punch through a Sherman from over 1,000 yards away. The Sherman needs to be almost close enough to shake hands before it can fight back. Most crews never get that chance. The fog helps the Germans. It hides movement. It hides numbers. It hides intent. American commanders know something is coming, but not where, not when, not how many. Radios crackle with partial reports. Coordinates without certainty. Warnings without solutions. This is not a heroic moment. Nobody is charging. Nobody is inspiring speeches. Men are cold. Engines idle. Hands grip controls too tightly. Every minute that passes without contact feels like mercy. Every minute also feels like borrowed time. Above it all, small observation planes drift like insects barely noticed. Fabric wings, weak engines, aircraft. Nobody bothers shooting at because they don't matter. They only watch. They only report. They only survive by being ignored. Down below, tanks are burning already. Smoke rises through the fog in slow, ugly columns. Crews climb out when they can. When they can't, the fog keeps their secrets. This is not a story about bravery yet. This is a story about being trapped in a situation where bravery isn't enough and waiting quietly for something worse to arrive. Up in the cockpit, the war looks different, smaller, slower, almost manageable if you don't look too long. The man flying this fragile little aircraft is not a fighter ace, not a decorated hero, not someone the war was designed for. His name is Charles Carpenter, and before all of this, he taught at high school history, classrooms, chalk dust. Teenagers, half listening to stories about ancient wars, famous battles, men long dead. Carpenter used to explain strategy from textbooks, talk about outcomes that were already decided. In those lessons, nobody bled, nobody burned, nobody screamed. Now he flies an L-4 Grasshopper, a fabric-covered observation plane that barely qualifies as an aircraft by wartime standards. No armor, no weapons, no illusions. His job is simple. Observe reports, stay alive by being ignored. Spot enemy movement. Call coordinates. Let someone else do the fighting. From above, he watches tanks advance and stop again. He watches Shermans disappear behind hedgerows and never come back out. He watches crews bail out, sometimes on fire, sometimes not moving at all. He reports what he sees calmly, professionally, because that's what the job requires, but the distance doesn't protect him. Not really. Every explosion below writes itself into memory. Every burning tank rewrites the lectures he once gave. This is not a map with arrows anymore. This is not a lesson with a clear ending. Carpenter flies circles while others die. He follows procedure while chaos unfolds beneath him. The irony isn't lost on him. He teaches history, yet he's stuck watching it happen, unable to interfere, forced to remain a spectator. For now, that's all he is allowed to be. A witness, a pair of eyes in the sky. A history teacher watching the present turn into something future students will read about without knowing how loud it was or how close it felt. From the air, destruction doesn't arrive all at once. It comes in pieces, a flash, smoke, then another flash somewhere else. Sherman tanks don't explode like in movies. They burn slowly, stubbornly, as if refusing to admit they've already lost. Carpenter watches one get hit from the flank. The turret jerks, then freezes. Flames leak out of the engine deck like something breathing its last. A hatch opens. One man climbs out. Then another doesn't. The tank keeps burning, patient and unforgiving. On the radio, his voice stays calm. Coordinates, bearings, distance. He speaks in numbers while men below are turning into silhouettes against fire. Artillery acknowledges. Adjustments requested. Fire mission pending, always pending. Another Sherman disappears behind a hedgerow. Seconds later, smoke rises from the same spot. No return fire. No second chance. German Panthers don't rush. They wait for angles. They let the fog do the work. It's efficient. Almost polite in a very German way. Carpenter circles again. And again. He marks a position, sends reports, does everything the manual tells him to do. The manual, unfortunately, never mentions what to do when you recognize the same burning tank shape for the third time in one morning. He can see crew members bailing out uniforms on fire, running a few steps before collapsing. From this height, they look small, too small. The distance is supposed to help. It doesn't. It only makes the helplessness clearer. He has no weapons, no authority to intervene. His aircraft exists to watch, not to interfere. That is the deal. That is the logic. And it makes perfect sense, right up until the moment it doesn't. Carpenter reports another set of coordinates, another acknowledgement, another promise of steel arriving too late. He keeps flying because stopping wouldn't change anything. Because doing nothing feels worse than doing something useless. Up here, the war is quiet. Down there, it's eating men alive, and Carpenter is stuck in between watching history right itself in smoke, realizing that knowing how battles are supposed to work does absolutely nothing when you're forced to witness how they actually do. Ideas in war rarely arrive with drama. They usually show up quietly, almost accidentally, slipped into conversation between exhausted men who don't expect them to matter. This one was no different. Carpenter heard it in passing. 2 other L-4 pilots had bolted bazookas to their wings. Not for tanks, just for trucks. Soft targets, quick shots. More harassment than combat. Most people laughed. An observation plane with rockets sounded like a bad joke, the kind told in a mess tent to distract from the smell of smoke and burned oil. Bazookas belonged on the ground. Planes were supposed to stay out of the fight. Everyone knew that. Manuals definitely knew that. But Carpenter didn't laugh. He kept thinking about the trucks. If a fabric plane could survive firing a rocket at a moving vehicle, then the impossible part wasn't the plane. It was the target. Trucks were easy, tanks were harder, thicker, heavier, more dangerous, but they also had weak spots. Every history teacher knows that. Armor is never perfect. It's just convincing enough to make people stop trying. The thought settled in slowly like fog. If a bazooka could punch through a truck, it could damage a tank. Maybe not always destroy it, maybe not from the front, but stopping it would be enough. A stopped tank is a problem. A burning tank is chaos. This wasn't heroism. Carpenter didn't picture medals or headlines. He pictured fewer burning Shermans, fewer men climbing out on fire, fewer coordinates sent too late. The idea wasn't brave, it was practical, almost annoyingly logical. He knew it sounded insane. He also knew that staying in the air, circling and reporting, was achieving nothing except excellent documentation of disaster. Someone had to do something different. Not because it was glorious, but because doing nothing had already proven useless. So the idea stuck. Quiet, unofficial, dangerous, and once it was there, it refused to go away. Preparation doesn't look heroic. It looks like problem-solving under bad lighting with tired men and worse options. Carpenter doesn't announce his plan. He doesn't need approval from people who already think it's a terrible idea. He finds an ordnance technician and a crew chief who are curious enough or reckless enough to help. The bazookas are bolted to the wing struts, angled just enough to make aiming possible, and survival questionable. 6 launchers in total, rockets hanging where nothing explosive was ever meant to hang. Each added pound matters. The Grasshopper was designed to carry eyes and a radio, not steel tubes and shaped charges. Numbers start adding up in uncomfortable ways. The aircraft is overweight. The wings are fabric. The exhaust from a bazooka burns hot enough to turn mistakes into fireballs. Nobody knows if the cotton-treated wings will ignite. Nobody knows if the plane can pull out of a dive with that much drag and weight. Nobody has tested this in combat or anywhere else that matters. Other pilots shake their heads. Some joke about it. Others don't bother hiding their opinions. Flying a slow, unarmored plane straight at tanks is not bravery. It's suicide with better documentation. The nickname spreads quickly. Rosie the Rocketer. Half joke, half warning. Carpenter listens. He nods. He doesn't argue. He knows the risks better than anyone, because he's the one who will be inside the cockpit when the theory meets gravity. But he also knows the alternative. Keep circling, keep reporting, keep watching men burn while waiting for someone else to fix the problem. This isn't impulse. It's calculation. Ugly, uncomfortable calculation. He studies angles, distances, escape paths. He knows the bazooka won't kill every tank. He doesn't need it to. He just needs it to stop one. Long enough to change what happens on the ground. By the time the aircraft is ready, nobody is confident. Not the crew, not the pilots watching, not Carpenter himself. The only thing everyone agrees on is simple. Once he takes off, the Grasshopper will either come back damaged or not come back at all. Carpenter climbs into the cockpit anyway. Not because he thinks it's safe, but because at this point, safety has already left the conversation. The takeoff is ugly. The Grasshopper lurches forward like it doesn't quite agree with the decision it's been dragged into. The engine works harder than it should. The wings feel heavier, slower to respond. This aircraft was never meant to feel this way, and it makes sure everyone knows it. Fog swallows the ground almost immediately. Visibility drops to nothing. Carpenter climbs anyway, steady hands, eyes fixed on instruments and instinct. The war below disappears into white silence. For long minutes, there is nothing to shoot at, nothing to confirm this wasn't a very creative mistake. When the fog finally thins, it does so unevenly. Fields appear in fragments. Roads cut through the haze. Then movement. Dark shapes where nothing should be moving. Tanks. Carpenter lowers the nose slightly and lines up the approach. This is the moment where theory meets gravity. The bazookas sit quiet under the wings, patient, heavy, unimpressed by courage. He knows the numbers. He knows the range. He knows he has to get close. Very close. The Grasshopper noses down into its first dive. Speed builds faster than comfort would prefer. The fabric wings shudder. Wind screams through metal tubes that were never meant to sing. The target grows fast. Too fast. At the last moment, Carpenter fires. The rocket leaves the wing with a violent crack flame, blasting past fabric by inches. There is no time to admire it. He pulls back hard, fighting the extra weight, waiting to see if the aircraft agrees to climb. Gunfire flashes from below, small arms angry and surprised. Rounds punch through fabric, but the Grasshopper keeps moving. Carpenter levels out and looks back. The Panther has stopped. Smoke seeps from the engine deck, not destroyed, immobilized. And suddenly the impossible thing has happened. A tank has been stopped by an airplane that was never supposed to matter. The German column scatters. Infantry points skyward. What was once ignored is now very much noticed. Carpenter turns for home, heart steady, but louder than the engine. One rocket fired. One tank stopped. The idea works. Barely. Dangerously. But it works. And now everyone on the ground knows it. The second sortie feels different the moment Carpenter lifts off. Nothing about the sky has changed, but the ground has. The Germans have learned. The harmless little observation plane is no longer invisible. It is now a problem. As he approaches the battlefield again, fire comes up almost immediately. Not random shots, not curious bursts, coordinated fire. Rifles, machine pistols, tracers stitching lines through the air where he's expected to dive. Someone below has done the math and doesn't like the answer. Carpenter spots another group of panthers moving along a tree line. He knows he should turn away. The Grasshopper is already wounded from the first run, fabric patched with hope. Control responses slightly delayed. This aircraft has exactly one advantage left: surprise. And that advantage is evaporating fast. He lines up anyway. The dive is steeper this time, faster, less forgiving. The bazooka tubes howl as air tears past them. The target fills the windscreen. Then the firing switch clicks. The rocket launches clean. Carpenter pulls up hard. Something hits the aircraft. A sharp metallic thud. Then another. The engine coughs once, just long enough to get his attention. Warning lights don't exist in this cockpit, but instinct does. This wasn't a near miss. Gunfire intensifies. The Germans are aiming now. They are tracking his pattern, waiting for the pull-up walking fire through the space his plane is about to occupy. Bullets rip through fabric. The Grasshopper shudders, protesting every correction. Carpenter circles wide, fighting the controls. He looks back. The Panther is stopped again, smoke rising, immobilized, not destroyed but no longer moving forward. On the ground, German infantry scatter. They aren't ignoring him anymore. They're hunting him. He should leave. Every sensible calculation says this sortie is over. The plane is damaged. Fuel is finite. The enemy is awake, so he turns back in. Another dive, lower this time. Faster than planned. Fire reaches up immediately. Tracers pass close enough to count. The Grasshopper absorbs more hits. Something tears near the tail. The controls feel wrong but still usable. The rocket hits. Flames bloom. This one burns. Carpenter doesn't watch it. He's too busy staying airborne. The Germans below are fully committed now, guns tracking infantry, coordinating the sky no longer safe. This is no longer experimentation. This is pursuit. And Carpenter is still in the air, damaged, outnumbered, and continuing forward because stopping now would mean admitting the first success was a fluke, and he refuses to let it be that. The radio crackles again, and this time the words don't leave much room for interpretation. A waterpoint crew. 20 American soldiers. Trucks stalled in a clearing. No heavy weapons. Panthers closing in from the northeast. Minutes, not hours. Carpenter glances at the gauges. Fuel is low. The engine temperature isn't where it should be. The control response still works, but only if he's gentle, and this is not a situation that rewards gentleness. The aircraft has already taken more punishment than it was ever meant to survive. There is an obvious answer. Turn west. Head back to the airstrip. Land while the Grasshopper is still in one piece. Reload. Report. Let someone else handle it. That is what procedure would suggest. That is what survival would suggest. He doesn't do it. From above, he can already see the clearing. 5 trucks. Men moving too quickly, then stopping, then moving again. Rifles raised toward shapes that are still out of reach. And beyond them, the Panthers, slow, calm, closing the distance without urgency because urgency isn't necessary. Carpenter knows exactly what happens next if nothing changes. He has watched it all morning. The tanks will stop just outside rifle range. The turrets will traverse. One high-explosive round will end the conversation. Maybe 2 to be thorough. The engine vibrates beneath him, a reminder that time is not on his side either. He could leave now and probably make it back. Probably. He could also stay and almost certainly not. This is the moment that doesn't show up in after-action reports. The part where numbers stop being abstract and start having faces. 20 men. Not symbols, not coordinates. 20 breathing problems waiting to be solved or erased. Carpenter reduces altitude. The terrain rises to meet him. Trees slide past closer than they should. The fuel needle keeps falling. He doesn't argue with himself anymore. The math is simple, even if the outcome isn't. He turns back toward the Panthers, not because it's brave, not because it's reckless, but because once you see exactly how this ends, choosing not to interfere feels like making a decision all its own. Carpenter drops lower, not a little lower, dangerously low. Tree lines rush past the cockpit. The ground is no longer a map, it's an obstacle course. This is not an altitude meant for airplanes, it's meant for mistakes. The Germans expect him to come from above. They always do. Their guns are angled skyward, tracking the dive that never comes. Instead, the Grasshopper skims forward, hidden by terrain, by speed, by disbelief. Nobody plans for an attack from something that should already be dead. He pulls up hard at the last moment and immediately noses over into a steep dive. The angle is brutal. The airframe screams. The engine rattles like it's coming apart bolt by bolt. The first Panther fills the windscreen. 2 rockets fire almost together. The recoil shoves the aircraft sideways. Carpenter fights it, barely keeping the wings level. Both rockets hit. One punches into the turret ring. The other finds the engine deck. The Panther stops. Flames erupt. Hatches fly open. Crew bails out burning. No pause, no celebration. He stays low banks, hard lines up the second Panther. German infantry is running now. Not advancing. Running, guns swing wildly, trying to track something that refuses to follow rules. Carpenter fires again. 1 rocket misses. The other strikes the turret side. A secondary explosion lifts the turret just enough to ruin any hope of survival. That tank is done. The third Panther tries to move, tries to turn away, but there's no time. Carpenter dives again. 1 rocket, low, track hit. The tank slews sideways and stops, immobilized. Still alive, but irrelevant. The last Panther remains, closest to the trapped Americans. The engine in Carpenter's plane is dying. Oil smoke pours back over the wings. The propeller shudders. Every sound says this is the final pass, whether he wants it or not. He arms everything left. 3 rockets, 1 chance. The Grasshopper drops to a height that feels insulting to gravity. The Panther commander is visible in the hatch, scanning for threats that don't make sense. He sees the plane too late. Carpenter fires all 3 rockets at once. The recoil nearly tears the right wing away. The aircraft rolls violently. He wrestles it back blind for a second, waiting for the wing to still be there. It is. All 3 rockets hit. 1 into the turret side, 1 into the upper hull, 1 into the track. The effect is catastrophic. The Panther erupts from the inside. Ammunition cooks off. The turret lifts and separates. The hull splits open. There is no escape. Silence follows, broken only by the sound of a dying engine and scattered German infantry, trying to understand how a fabric airplane just erased their armor. 4 Panthers stopped. 2 destroyed, 2 immobilized. 20 Americans still breathing. Carpenter pulls away low and shaking because staying would mean joining the wreckage. The Germans are no longer hunting him. They are too busy surviving. The impossible didn't just work. It overwhelmed them. The moment passes and the cost arrives immediately. The engine doesn't fail dramatically. There's no explosion, no heroic final roar. It simply gives up. A cough, a grinding sound. Then silence. The propeller slows, still turning, not because it wants to, but because momentum hasn't noticed the problem yet. Carpenter glides. The Grasshopper is no longer an aircraft. It's a suggestion. Torn fabric flaps in the wind. Oil streaks the windshield, turning the world into a blurred smear of brown and gray. Controls respond, but reluctantly, like a tired animal that has already done too much. He checks altitude. Not enough. Checks distance. Too far. The runway is visible, clear prepared for him, and completely unreachable. Gravity doesn't negotiate. It only waits. Carpenter aims for a plowed field instead. Soft ground, uneven, better than trees, better than fire, maybe. The descent is steep, too steep. There's no power left to argue with physics. The wheels touch. The earth grabs them hard. The grasshopper pitches forward and flips. Metal screams. Wood snaps. The propeller digs into mud and stops forever. Silence again. Then the smell. Fuel, hot metal, oil, all the ingredients for one final mistake. Carpenter hangs upside down harness, biting into his chest, thinking very calmly that this would be a stupid way to die after everything else. He releases the harness, drops onto the cockpit roof, kicks at the door. It sticks. Of course it does. He kicks again, harder. It gives way. He crawls out and runs. Not heroically, just far enough. Seconds later, ground crews arrive. Foam covers the wreck. Flames never come. The grasshopper is destroyed, twisted finished. Carpenter survives. 4 Panthers stopped. 20 men alive. 1 airplane paid the bill. What happened that day didn't end with smoke clearing from a field. It rippled outward, quietly, methodically. The kind of change that doesn't announce itself but rewrites rules anyway. Before Carpenter, observation planes were ignored. Cubs flew low and slow watched, but not hunted. They were inconvenient, not dangerous. After Carpenter, that assumption died. German units adjusted immediately. Orders changed. Any L4 site was to be engaged. Infantry carried dedicated weapons to watch the sky. Tank commanders posted spotters not just for aircraft, but specifically for small fabric ones with tubes under their wings. The battlefield adapted because it had to. Carpenter received another grasshopper days later. Same modifications, same risks, same outcome waiting if luck ran out. And he kept flying, not once or twice, but again and again. 63 more bazooka sorties, each one conducted in airspace where everyone now expected him, where surprise was gone and survival depended on timing terrain, and the enemy making one small mistake. Official records credit him with 6 tanks destroyed. Witnesses on the ground suggested more. The exact number mattered less than the effect. German armor slowed. Formations spread. Attacks hesitated. Tanks that once advanced confidently now scanned the sky for something that looked ridiculous and had already proven lethal. The concept didn't scale. Too risky, too fragile, too dependent on one man's judgment. Other pilots tried it once and stopped. Statistically, it was unsustainable. But for a critical window, it worked. Carpenter's presence forced armored units to think about threats they weren't trained to respect. It bought time. It disrupted coordination. It changed behavior. In war, that counts. He wasn't a new doctrine. He was an exception. And exceptions, when they appear at the right moment, can bend an entire battlefield, just enough to matter. The war ends, but it doesn't let go immediately. Carpenter survives every mission the enemy throws at him, only to be stopped by something that doesn't care about tactics or courage. In early 1985, doctors give him a diagnosis that sounds colder than any battlefield report. Hodgkin's disease. Terminal. 2 years, maybe less. It's an oddly unfair ending for a man who flew into gunfire for a living. Tanks failed to kill him. Anti-aircraft fire failed. Gravity tried and missed. Cancer, apparently, would finish the job. Except it doesn't. Carpenter goes home. Back to Urbana, Illinois. Back to classrooms, chalkboards, and teenagers who complain about homework. He returns to teaching history, standing in front of students who read about wars as past events, not lived experiences. He doesn't dramatize it. He doesn't brag. If anything, he understates it, as if flying a fabric plane at tanks was just a strange substitute lesson plan. The 2 years pass, then 5, then 10. Medical predictions quietly expire. Carpenter keeps teaching, keeps showing up, keeps living. The war that couldn't kill him becomes something he carries quietly, not something he displays. He dies in 1966, decades after doctors said he wouldn't. No bazookas on the gravestone. No nickname. Just rank name and dates. Enough. For a long time, that's where the story stays. Forgotten. Filed away. The airplane disappears. The legend fades into footnotes and old newspapers. Then years later, someone recognizes the aircraft. The Grasshopper. Rosie the Rocketer. Restored. Remembered. A reminder that history doesn't always preserve what matters right away. Carpenter never asked to be a symbol. He wasn't trying to invent doctrine or chase immortality. He simply refused to watch quietly when something could be done. In the end, that's what remains. Not the weapons, not the tanks, but the stubborn, inconvenient human choice to act and then to return home and live an ordinary life anyway.